The sun was merciless over the alien desert city of Koresh. Its light burned down on the cracked streets, turning the ground into a sheet of heat. Dust swirled in the air, stinging the eyes of those who walked too slowly. Everywhere, people clutched metal flasks close to their bodies as if guarding treasure. In this place, water was not just life, was power. Near the edge of the market square, a small alien girl moved through the crowd. Her clothes were worn thin, patched in places with mismatched fabric. Her pale blue skin was dry and cracking around her elbows. Her large golden eyes scanned the stalls, not for food, not for trinkets, but for the one thing she needed most: water. She kept her head low as she walked past armored water guards. They stood beside giant metal tanks, each holding enough water to save 100 lives. But that water was not free. It belonged to the guild. And the guild made sure only the rich and the loyal could drink without fear. The girl's throat burned with every swallow. Her tongue felt like sand in her mouth. She thought of her mother lying weak in their tiny home, lips cracked, breathing shallow if she didn't bring water soon. Her mother wouldn't last the night. She spotted an opening. A merchant at the water stall had turned his back to argue with a customer. The guards were distracted by a group of shouting traders nearby. Her small hands trembled as she slipped forward in one smooth motion. She grabbed a dented metal cup from the stall's edge. She pressed the spout and watched as precious drops poured into the cup. The sound of water hitting metal was the sweetest thing she had ever heard. Her heart pounded. She filled it halfway enough for her mother. Maybe for herself too. Then a shadow fell over her. A hand, rough and clawed, clamped down on her wrist. The cup slipped from her fingers and clattered to the ground, spilling every drop. The merchant's voice was loud and furious, calling for the guards. In seconds, two massive enforcers had her by the arms. One of them snarled, his fangs glinting in the sun. "Thief!" She tried to speak, her voice dry and small. "It was for my mother," she whispered. They didn't care. The crowd began to gather, whispers filling the air like smoke. Everyone knew what happened to water thieves. The punishment was simple. Take the limb that stole. The guards dragged her toward the public square. Her feet scraped along the dusty ground as she struggled. She cried out for help, but no one stepped forward. In Koresh, helping a thief meant sharing their punishment. They reached the execution post in the center of the square. The hot metal shackles burned her wrists as they locked her in place. One of the guards retrieved a wide, curved blade from a rack. It caught the sunlight, gleaming like a deadly promise. Her breathing quickened. The blade was raised. Her golden eyes widened in terror. The crowd leaned in, some with pity, others with cold indifference. The executioner's hand tensed on the hilt, ready to strike. Then, a voice cut through the heat and noise. "Stop," it said, firm and clear. The crowd parted slightly as a figure stepped forward. It was a human, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dusty jacket and a travel pack. His hair was dark, his face shadowed under the brim of his hat. His eyes locked on the girl, then on the blade. "If you touch her," he said slowly, "you'll answer to me." The executioner hesitated, the blade still hovering. The crowd murmured humans were rare in Koresh, and one speaking out against the guild was almost unheard of. The alien guard nearest to him growled, "This is guild law. Outsider, step aside or join her." But the human didn't move. He took one step closer, his boots stirring the dust. The sun beat down on both men. The girl could hardly breathe. For the first time since she was caught, her fear was mixed with something else, a tiny spark of hope. The human's hand rested near the strap of his bag, maybe a weapon inside, maybe nothing at all, but his voice carried the weight of someone who didn't bluff. "I'll pay for the water," he said. "All of it." The guard laughed, a cruel, sharp sound. No payment for thieves, only punishment. The crowd held its breath. The girl closed her eyes. She knew the blade would fall any second. Then she heard the human's voice again, lower this time. Then you'll have to take me too. The executioner froze, his grip tightening on the hilt. The tension in the square was so thick, it seemed even the wind had stopped. Every pair of eyes in Koresh was on the human and the little alien girl, and in that moment, everything hung by a thread. Asterisk, the square had fallen silent. Only the faint creak of the shackles around the alien girl's wrists broke the stillness. The human stood there, unmoving, his shadow falling across her small frame. The executioner's eyes narrowed, reading the man's posture, trying to decide if this was a bluff or the start of trouble. The alien leader of the guards stepped forward, his heavy boots thudding on the dusty ground. He was tall, his scaled skin glinting under the sun, eyes like black stone. His voice rumbled like distant thunder. "Outsider, you don't understand our laws. This thief was caught stealing guild water. There is only one price for such a crime." The human's jaw tightened. He looked from the leader to the girl, then back again. "She's a child," he said, his voice calm but sharp, "and she was trying to save her mother." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some scoffed. Others exchanged uneasy glances. In Koresh, mercy was a word rarely spoken. One of the guards stepped closer to the human, his hand resting on the handle of his weapon. The heat between them was more than just the sun. "You will walk away now," the guard growled, "or you will join her at the post." The girl's heart thudded painfully in her chest. Her mind screamed for him to leave, to save himself. But her eyes wouldn't look away from him. There was something in the way he stood, a quiet strength. No one had ever stood for her like this. The human didn't move back. Instead, he took one slow step forward, closing the distance between himself and the executioner. The air around them seemed to tighten. "I'll pay for the water," he repeated, his voice steady. "Name your price." The leader barked out a laugh, deep and humorless. "There is no price," he said, "only law." He lifted his arm, signaling the executioner to strike. The crowd leaned forward, breaths held. But before the blade could fall, the human spoke again. "Then I'll offer something better." The leader paused, tilting his head. "I'll give you me," the human said. "I'll work for the guild carry. Guard, whatever you want until you decide I've paid her debt." A murmur spread through the crowd. Life debt bargains were rare, dangerous, and binding, if the guild accepted. The human would belong to them until they released him or killed him. The alien leader's lips curled into something between a smirk and a sneer. "You'd chain yourself for a stranger." The human's eyes didn't waver. "Yes," he said. For her, the leader glanced at the girl, still shackled to the post. She avoided his gaze, her shoulders trembling. The leader turned back to the human, studying him for a long moment. Then, slowly, he lowered his hand. "Release the thief," he ordered. "Chain her to him instead." The crowd gasped. Two guards moved quickly, unlocking the girl's wrists from the hot metal post. The skin beneath the shackles was red and raw before she could understand what was happening. The guards clicked a new chain between her wrist and the human's. The leader's voice carried across the square. "You belong to the guild now. Human, fail us, and both of you will die." The executioner lowered his blade, but his eyes promised this wasn't over. The human gave a small nod. Accepting the terms, he turned to the girl, her golden eyes wide and uncertain. "Stay close," he murmured. She didn't know why, but hearing his voice made the burning in her throat feel a little less sharp. The crowd began to disperse, some muttering that the human was a fool, others watching with strange curiosity. The guards led them toward the guild's compound, the chain between them clinking with every step. The sun still beat down, the dust still stung. But the girl's mind was spinning. She had been seconds away from losing her arm. Now, she was walking beside someone who had traded his freedom. For hers, she wanted to speak, to thank him. But the words felt heavy on her tongue. Finally, as they neared the edge of the square, she whispered, "Why did you do it?" The human's gaze stayed forward, scanning the road ahead. "Because no one else would," he said. And with that, the chain between them no longer felt like a shacklet, felt like a lifeline. The sun was lowering in the sky, but the heat still clung to the streets like a heavy blanket. The human and the alien girl walked side by side. The chain between them clinking with every step, guards marched behind them, their boots thudding. In rhythm, the girl's throat still burned. But now her mind raced faster than her heartbeat. She didn't even know his name, yet he had bound his life to hers. They reached the guild compounda tall. Dark structure made of stone and rusted metal. The gate creaked open with a deep groan, and the smell of stagnant water drifted out. Inside, workers moved heavy barrels, some filled with water, others sealed tightly with wax. Armed guards watched. From the walls above, their eyes cold. Here, everything belonged to the guild. The leader of the guards strode ahead of them. He stopped near a shaded area where a long table stood, papers and ledgers spread across it. He motioned for the human to step forward. "Your name?" the leader demanded. The human's voice was, "Steady, Jack." The leader made a mark in the ledger. "Jack," he said slowly. "You are bound by a life debt to the guild, until I decide your service is enough. You belong to us." He turned to the girl, "And your life is tied to his. If he fails, you both pay." The girl lowered her gaze, her fingers tightening around the chain. The leader's lips curved in a small, cruel smile. "Your first task begins now," he said, pointing toward the massive water tanks. "Those barrels need to be hauled to the upper storehouse before sundown. Fail, and the debt is broken." Jack glanced at the sun. It was already low. The task would take hours, maybe more, and the barrels looked heavy, even for him. But he only nodded. He turned to the girl. "Stay close, and don't speak to anyone unless I tell you." She gave a small nod, still too shocked to ask questions, as Jack worked, lifting and moving the heavy barrels. The girl stayed at his side. Some workers whispered as they passed, "Why would a human do this?" One muttered, "Fool's death." Another replied, shaking his head. Sweat ran down Jack's back. His hands ached from gripping the rough wood. The guards kept a close eye on him, waiting for him to falter. But every time his muscles screamed, he thought of the blade that had nearly taken the girl's arm. And he kept going. When they paused briefly in the shade, the girl finally spoke, her voice quiet. "My name is Sira." Jack glanced down at her. "Sira," he repeated, as if committing it to memory. She hesitated, then added, "You didn't have to do this for me." Jack's eyes stayed on the barrel in front of him. "Maybe not," he said, "but someone had to." The hours dragged, the sky turning from gold to deep red. By the time the last barrel was rolled into the storehouse, Jack's arms felt like lead. The guards inspected the work and gave a curt nod. The leader appeared again, his expression unreadable. "You've done well for a first-day human," he said, "but this is only the beginning." Sira glanced between them, her stomach tightening with worry. If this was the beginning, what would the guild demand next? That night, they were allowed to rest in a small, dim storage room. The floor was hard, the air damp. Sira sat against the wall, watching Jack as he cleaned the dirt from his hands. The chain between them lay on the ground, heavy and silent. After a long moment, Sira spoke again. "My mother. She's sick, without water. She?" Her voice trailed off. Jack looked at her, his eyes narrowing slightly. "She's why you took the water," he said. Sira nodded. Jack leaned back against The wall, his jaw set. Then tomorrow, we'll figure out a way to get some to her. Sierra blinked at him. You'll help? Jack gave a small, tired smile. That's what the bargain was for. The chain between them no longer felt like just a mark of the guild's control. For the first time since the square, Sierra felt a fragile thread of hope. But outside the storage room, the guild leader spoke quietly to one of his men. Push him harder tomorrow. Break him, and when he fails, they both fall. Morning came with a pale light seeping through the cracks of the storage room wall. The air was cool, but it carried the smell of stagnant water from the guild tanks. Jack woke first, stretching his sore shoulders. Sierra sat, curled in the corner, her knees drawn up, her golden eyes watching him quietly. The chain between them clinked as Jack stood. We should get moving, he said, but his voice was low. Sierra nodded. Though her expression was far away, she looked like someone who had something to say, but didn't know if it was safe. As they stepped out into the compound yard, the days. Work began immediately. Guards barked orders at workers hauling barrels and repairing the massive metal pipes that fed the tanks. Jack's gaze followed one of those pipes that led beyond the walls, out toward the desert hills, but he noticed something strange. The water flowing in wasn't constant. It came in short bursts, then stopped completely for long minutes. By midday, Jack managed to pull Sierra aside while pretending to adjust the chain on his wrist. Tell me the truth, he said. Where does the guild get its water? Sierra hesitated, looking around before leaning closer. It comes from the ridge wells. Far in the desert, she whispered, but the guild controls the flow. They block it so people think there's less water than there really is. Jack's brow furrowed. They're creating the shortage. Sierra nodded slowly. They sell water for high prices and anyone who can't pay. Her voice caught. They let them die. Jack's stomach tightened. He had seen greed before, but never so openly tied to life and death. And your mother? He asked. Sierra's voice dropped even lower. She used to work in the wells. She spoke out when the guild started hoarding the water. They beat her and threw her out. She hasn't been able to work since. Jack glanced toward the guards patrolling. The walls? They know who you are, he said quietly. Sierra gave a bitter smile. That's why they wanted to make an example of me. For the rest of the day, Jack worked, but his mind was elsewhere. Every barrel he lifted, every shout from a guard, only sharpened his anger. He watched the pipes, the locks, the guards' routines. If there was a way to get water to Sierra's mother, it would mean going against the guild directly. As the sun began to sink, they were allowed a brief break. Jack guided Sierra toward the shade of an unused storage shed. There, she told him more. The ridge wells are deep, she said, but the water is pure. If you could open the gates there, the flow would reach the city in hours. Jack looked at her. That would break the guild's hold, he said. It would make them your enemy forever, she replied. Her voice trembling, Jack gave a small, humorless smile. I think they already consider me their enemy. They returned to their work until night fell. The guards finally led them back to their small room, the chain still locked to their wrists. Jack sat against the wall, his mind racing through possibilities. Sierra sat beside him, staring at the ground. You shouldn't have gotten involved, she said softly. Maybe not, he replied, but I did. And now I'm going to finish what I started. Outside their door, 2 guards passed by, speaking in low voices. Leader says, tomorrow they'll test him. Something heavy, something impossible. Their words faded as they moved away, but Jack had heard enough. The guild wasn't going to let him serve out the debt peacefully. That night, long after the noises of the compound had faded, Jack shifted quietly. Sierra, he whispered, tomorrow we start looking for a way out. Her eyes widened. You mean escape? Not just escape, he said. We're going to get your mother water, and maybe everyone else too. The chain between them lay cool and heavy in the dark. It was meant to keep them trapped, but now it was a reminder they were in this together, and tomorrow, the first step toward breaking the guild's control would begin. The next morning came with a blazing sun that made the walls of the guild compound shimmer like molten stone. Jack and Sierra were pulled from their small room before they could even drink. The leader of the guards stood waiting in the yard, his arms crossed, a faint smirk on his scaled face. "Today," the leader said, his voice echoing off the walls, "we see if the human is worth keeping." A group of guards wheeled out a massive barrel, so wide that it took 3 men to push it. It was filled to the brim with water, the metal sides dripping cool condensation in the heat. "You will carry this barrel to the south tower before the sun reaches the top of the sky." The leader ordered, "Fail, and both you and the girl lose your lives." The crowd of workers whispered among themselves. The south tower was uphill, a long, uneven path littered with stones. No one carried a barrel that size alone. Was a job for a cart and a team of strong laborers. Jack's gaze swept over the barrel, then to the guards' amused faces. It was clear they expected him to fail. Sierra's fingers tightened on the chain. "You can't do this," she whispered. "It's impossible." Jack gave her a quick look, his voice steady. "Impossible just means it hasn't been done yet." He bent down, gripping the edge of the barrel. The metal was cold under his palms, but the weight was shocking when he tried to lift it. The guards laughed, but Jack adjusted his stance, shifting the weight to his legs. Slowly, inch by inch, the barrel rose. The chain between them forced Sarah to walk close, matching his steps. The path to the south tower stretched ahead like a cruel test with each step. The barrel dug into Jack's arms and shoulders. Sweat poured down his face, dripping into the dust. The guards followed at a distance. Ready to step in the moment, he stumbled, halfway up the slope. His muscles burned as if they were on fire. Sierra glanced at him, fear in her eyes. "Put it down before they kill you," she said, her voice shaking. Jack gritted his teeth. "They'll kill us if I stop, so I'm not stopping." Every few steps, the ground shifted under his boots. Once, he nearly lost his footing, but Sierra pressed her shoulder against his side, steadying him. The moment didn't go unnoticed. 2 guards exchanged glances. They saw more than just defiance in the human's eyes. They saw the girl helping him. It was a dangerous sign of unity, something the guild didn't like. By the time they reached the base of the south tower, Jack's arms felt like they might tear from their sockets. The barrel slipped slightly, but he managed to keep hold until they reached the platform. With a final grunt, he rolled it into place. The heavy thud echoing through the courtyard, the watching workers fell silent. The leader approached, his expression unreadable. "You surprise me, human," he said slowly. "Perhaps you are more than you seem." Jack didn't reply. He was too busy trying to catch his breath, but his eyes never left the leader's. The leader's gaze shifted to Sarah. "Your human may have strength," he said, "but strength alone won't save you here." He gestured to the guards. "Return them to their room. Tomorrow, we see if his will can break back in the storage room." Sierra poured a small portion of water from a dented flask into Jack's hands. "Here," she said. "You need it more than me." Jack shook his head, pushing it back toward her. "You have someone waiting for you," he said. "Drink it, as..." She sipped. Sierra's eyes studied him. "They hate you more now," she said softly. "Good," Jack replied. "If they hate me, they'll focus on me instead of you." That night, while the compound slept, Jack leaned against the wall, staring at the faint glow of the city lights beyond the guild walls. The South Tower had given him more than just a victory, it had given him a view. From there, he had seen the direction of the Ridgewells. And more importantly, he had spotted a gate that looked far less guarded than the main entrance. He glanced at Sierra, who had finally drifted into a light sleep. The chain between them gleamed faintly in the dim light. Tomorrow, the guild would try to break him again. But tomorrow, he would start planning how to break them instead. The next morning, the air in the guild compound felt heavier than usual. It wasn't just the heat, there was tension, like a storm about to break. Jack and Ciro were pulled from their room again, the chain between them rattling as they walked. The guards looked sharper today. Their weapons polished, their eyes colder. The leader of the guards waited in the middle of the yard. Behind him stood a large group of onlookers, workers, traders, and even some townsfolk. It wasn't normal for so many to gather inside the guild walls. Ciro glanced nervously at them. Why? Are they here? She whispered. Jack's eyes narrowed. They want to make an example out of us. The leader raised his voice so all could hear. Yesterday, the human proved he could lift. He said, but today, we see if he can survive without breaking. The rules, he motioned to a nearby table. On it sat a single metal cup filled with water, the surface glistening under the sun. You will carry this cup, the leader said, through the market and back, without spilling a single drop. Fail, and the girl will pay with her life. The crowd murmured. Everyone knew the market was chaos. People pushing, shouting, carts rattling, and hands ready to snatch anything of value. A single drop spilled would be enough for the guild to declare failure. Jack stepped forward. I'll do it, he said. Ciro's heart pounded. This was different from lifting a barrel. This was a trap. One shove, one wrong step, and it would all be over. The leader's smile was thin. Begin, he ordered. Jack picked up the cup, holding it steady in both hands. The chain between him and Ciro forced her to walk close. Matching his pace, they stepped through the gate into the crowded market. Eyes followed them instantly, some with curiosity, others with pity. Whispers spread fast. That's the human, someone said. The one who saved the water thief. The market was alive with movement. Vendors shouted over each other, trying to draw in customers. Children darted between stalls, chasing each other. Carts rumbled past, their wheels kicking up dust. Jack moved slowly, his eyes fixed on the trembling surface of the water. Ciro stayed close, her gaze sweeping the crowd for trouble. Halfway through the market, the trouble found them, a group of young men. Rough-looking and armed with short knives stepped into their path. One smirked. Guild's pet, he said. Let's see how steady your hands really are. He gave a sudden shove to Jack's shoulder. The water in the cup rippled dangerously. Gasps rose from nearby onlookers, but Jack's grip didn't falter. He adjusted his stance, kept the cup level, and stepped past them without a word. The young men didn't follow. Something in his calm defiance made them hesitate, but others saw it, and the whispers grew louder. He didn't spill it, someone said, not even after they pushed him. When they finally turned back toward the guild gates, the crowd in the market parted for them. It wasn't out of fear, was respect. Jack could feel it in their eyes. These were people who had lived under the guild's cruelty for years. And now they had seen someone refuse to break under it. Back in the yard, the leader stood waiting. His eyes scanned the cup, then narrowed. Every drop was still there. He said nothing, only waved for the guards to take it away. But the silence of the watching crowd said more than words. They had seen the human win again that night. Whispers filled the worker quarters. Some spoke of the human as a fool, but others spoke of him as something more, someone who might stand against the guild. Ciro sat beside Jack in their small room. They're starting to believe in you, she said softly. Jack shook his head. They need to believe in themselves. Outside their door, a worker passed by, his voice low. If he can do it, maybe we can too. The chain between Jack and Ciro felt lighter that night. Not because it was gone, but because for the first time, The people of Koresh had started to see it for what it was, a symbol of defiance, and the guild had noticed it too, which meant the next move would be theirs, and it would not be gentle. Night had fallen over Koresh, but the city didn't sleep inside the guild compound. Torches burned in iron brackets, casting long, shifting shadows on the walls. Jack sat in the corner of the small room, his back against the cold stone. Sira sat beside him, her knees pulled up, her eyes fixed on the floor. She had seen enough of the guild to know they would never stop until they broke him, Molth. Jack leaned forward, speaking in a low voice. Tomorrow, they'll push harder, maybe harder than they ever have. Sira looked at him, fear flickering in her golden eyes. What will you do? She whispered. Jack's voice was steady. We're not waiting for tomorrow. We move tonight. Her breath caught. Tonight. He nodded. Tonight, we take back the water. Using a small metal pin he had hidden in his boot, Jack worked on the lock of the chain between them. Tessa clicked open with a soft sound. Sira stared at the loose chain in her hands. For the first time since the square, she was free, at least for now. They slipped into the yard, moving in the shadows between the stone walls. The guards were fewer at night, most gathered near the front gates. Jack led her toward the south side, where he had spotted the smaller gate from the tower. From there, a pipe to the ridge wells ran straight out into the desert. It was their only chance. When they reached the gate, a single guard blocked the way. He was half asleep. Leaning on his spear, Jack moved silently, stepping behind him. A quick strike to the back of the head dropped the guard to the ground without a sound. They slipped through and followed the pipe into the night. The desert air was cooler, the stars sharp and clear above. Sira's steps were quick, her voice low. The ridge wells aren't far, she said. But the guild will notice the water. By morning, Jack glanced at her. Then we make sure they notice too late. They reached the wells just as the moon climbed high. Massive stone towers surrounded deep shafts where the water was stored. Thick metal gates blocked the flow into the city pipes. Jack saw the heavy locks and pulled a small pouch from his pack. Inside were tools, simple but enough. As he worked the lock, Sira kept watch, her heart racing. Every creak of the desert wind sounded like approaching footsteps. Finally, the lock gave way with a metallic snap. Jack pulled the gate lever. A deep groan echoed through the wells as the first surge of water rushed forward. The sound was like thunder rolling through the pipes. Sira gasped as she saw it, a steady, unstoppable stream heading toward Koresh for the first time in years. The city would wake to free-flowing water. Jack grabbed her hand. We need to move before they figure out we're here, but it was too late. Shouts rang out in the distance. Torches flared on the horizon. Guild riders were coming fast. They ran, following the pipe back toward the city. When they reached the outskirts, people were already gathering in the streets. Water was pouring from the public fountains for the first time in years. Children splashed in it. Laughing, old women cupped their hands and drank until they coughed. The sound of joy spread like wildfire. The guild riders arrived, but they were met by a wall of people. The crowd had seen what had happened. They knew the human and the girl had done it, when the leader of the guards shouted for them to move aside. The people refused. No one backed away. Jack and Sira stood in the middle of the square, the chain still in her hand. This ends now, Jack said, his voice carrying over the crowd. You can't take what belongs to everyone. The people roared in agreement. The guild's power was breaking not from weapons, but from the unity of the city. The guards, outnumbered and surrounded, backed away, their leader glaring but powerless. By sunrise, Koresh was alive with running water. Fountains poured freely, and the tanks were open for all. Sira's mother, weak but smiling, drank deeply from a cup Jack handed her. You saved us, she whispered. Jack shook his head. No, we all saved each other. As the sun rose over the desert, the city was no longer the same. The guild had lost its grip, and the people had found their courage. And for Sarah, the human who had once been a stranger was now the reason she had a future. The chain between them was gone, but the bond it had created would never break.